Welcome to our care provider training program. Our goal is to strengthen families through social connections, education, and resources. We are a training collaborative with the mission to provide specialized training to care providers for children and youth. Care provider populations eligible to receive training include children and family service employees, current or prospective resource parents, adoptive parents, relative guardians, and employees of a private child placing and child care agency. Our training is trauma-informed, and the goal of our workshops includes helping children and families heal from the impact of trauma and improve their social and emotional well-being. Each content expert is prepared to answer specific questions related to your family or the children and families that we serve. Today's training is brought to you from Kids and Families Together in collaboration with Strengthening Families through Ventura County Children and Family Services. Now I have the great honor and opportunity to introduce today's content expert. Joronda Montano is our content expert, and Joronda is going to explain a little bit about herself and her professional expertise. I want to introduce you to Joronda through my knowledge as a colleague for over a dozen years. Joronda and I have known each other a long time. We've walked in many communities doing this work. Joronda is not only an expert in all of the information she'll share today about preventing risky behavior, understanding children's mental health, their emotional well-being, and really taking a look at how drugs can impact the developing child and how we as adults and care providers can help prevent that in children's lives in a very constructive way. Joronda is an advocate for children and families. She's an activist for children and families. She works very hard to strengthen families and to help our communities be united in protecting and guiding our children. Joronda comes to us today with a wealth of knowledge, and it's exciting for me to invite her. So Joronda, thank you so much for joining our care provider training program. You're one of our loved content experts. We know you're here today. We know you've been here before, and we know you'll be here again. So welcome back, and thank you for all you're bringing to our community.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here this morning. I always love doing presentations with parents, and it's really interesting. Post-pandemic, we have the ability, I think, to just connect so much more and so easily because we can do it from our own houses, offices, living rooms, maybe the car even sometimes when we're doing it from a phone. So it just makes it much more accessible for us to all get the information that can support our families and our kids. And that is really important to me. I am going to share my screen so that you all can see the PowerPoint up in front of you. And I think you are able to see that now. Yes, good to go. Okay.
Looks great, Joronda.
Excellent. So can you tell me if you're seeing the screen that says preventing risky decisions?
Yes, we are.
You are. Okay, awesome. So let me go ahead and get started. So we are talking about risky decisions today, and we're going to talk about preventing risky decisions. And when that topic comes up for me, I've been in the field of prevention for a really long time. My focus or my thoughts always go to what happens as a result of risky things that our kids get into, either that being risky thoughts, risky behaviors, or risky environments. Some of those things we can have an impact on and we can change, some more easily than others. And some, it's just very difficult for us to do anything about it. So our focus needs to be placed on how do we build up protection around a child and a family, regardless of what things are happening around them. So, oops, there we go. So just a little bit about myself. Like I said, I've been in the field of prevention for 20 years. Some of you I recognize, you've been in trainings with me before. So welcome back. Good to see you all. And I'm glad that you had time to, or were able to make time today. I grew up in LA, and that really is probably the reason that I'm a preventionist. I grew up in South LA, and I watched, my community move from one thing to something different. And it really epitomizes what happens when risk start to increase for a school, a community, a family, and a child. And so with that experience, I have taken all of my life stories and put them into my 20-year career to try to help communities like mine and kids who are growing up like me or unlike me. I have a master's degree in public administration, and human development is my focus. So when we start to talk about things related to the brain or data, you'll notice that I talk a lot about it. So if you have questions in relation to data or the brain, when I get to different points in this presentation, I will be glad to answer those types of questions, because that is very near and dear to me as well. I've been a nonprofit professional in that time. I recently founded Neck Up Checkup, my own company, some years back now. And so I do that independently. So that is how I'm coming to you today as the CEO and professional preventionist with Neck Up Checkup. I'm also with kids in a sort of still a professional area, but I'm a coach. I'm a track coach. And so I'm with kids quite a bit. I spend probably the majority of my waking hours with teens and with kids. And I'm also a wife and a mom of 4. So it's happening right in my house as well. And I have one teenager, soon to have a second teenager in just a couple of weeks. And so, you guys say a little prayer for me as we are moving in 2 teenage brains in the house, and they are both boys. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So that's me. That's who I am. And we'll keep on going on this thing. Today, the problem that we are looking at is we have stress, anxiety, and depression that our young people are facing. And as they're facing that, we see so much more of that if we think about the generations before and what the stress looks like, where the anxiety comes from, what the depression is mounting out of. We see a direct connection between those challenges and early substance misuse. And so that's the problem that we're looking at today. So let's see, this is not controlling, so I'll have to control it manually. So our focus today, we're gonna look at how drug use becomes an extracurricular activity in a kid's life. And when I say extracurricular, I mean, this is something that a child progresses to, not just the first time experimentation, but there has to be a first time experimentation before they get to it becoming an activity that they regularly engage in. We'll look at if you have the ability to recognize, do you already have the ability to recognize paraphernalia, to recognize language? And if you don't, let's get you prepped for that today. Let's prime a few of those things. And then we'll specifically go into a few tools that will help you intervene if a child has already engaged in these habits, or prevent it before it begins. You already have tools. I will state some things that you already know, and then we can have a deeper discussion and you all can ask questions, and please do ask questions. Okay, so let's look at childhood first. What is the difference? What is the difference between childhood when you were a kid and childhood now? I'm going to let you guys drop that in the chat box or unmute yourself. What's the difference between childhood then and childhood now? And I have some answers, but I want to hear your answers. What do you guys think?
Social media.
Okay, big difference, right? Social media did not exist. It's relatively new. I mean, I can go back. Social media didn't even exist for years after I was out of college. So it is definitely relatively new. What else? What other differences do you all see?
Access to so much information, like really quick.
Right. I remember the encyclopedia man coming around and selling the encyclopedias like at your home, and you'd have that big Britannica library of encyclopedias. You had to go to A, B, or L, or Z. You had to literally crack open a book, and it may have taken a while, and maybe you couldn't find that book. It wasn't so easy to get that information. But now it is at your fingertips. Absolutely. Anything else that stands out to you guys about childhood then versus childhood now? And we can look at any decade.
There's a lot of things coming through the chat, Joranda.
Oh, let me open up my chat. Thank you.
Social media, texting, didn't have electronics, Uber, pandemic isolation, and access to deliverable drugs. And then
And
there's
this
more.
last one, I see no way to disconnect from negative people. It is an ongoing just stream of the potential for negativity. So it's very difficult to connect from these things. Access to the delivery of drugs. We'll get into that a little bit. So I'm glad this gives me an idea of what you guys are already thinking, where you already are. And it'll give us a good point to jump off from when we get to the conversation point near the end. So let's take a look at then versus now. So these are just a few things. Back then, we had lots of outdoor games. Kids were playing hide and seek. They were playing tag. They were playing football in the street. You didn't have to come inside until the street lights came on. These were some of these kind of rules. Kids were out. Now they're more in. Candy Crush, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. These are the things that are more common, and these are just a few. Back then, kids were taking notes with a pencil, or you had an ink pen and you took those notes personally. You wrote the notes down. Now we're doing it electronically. We're sharing it. Somebody didn't make it to class. Hey, can you email me this? Or can you text me your notes or whatever? It is so electronic, and it's not just the kid who has to take the notes. Even if that other kid is in class, can we share it electronically? I don't have to go photocopy anything or look over your shoulder and rewrite something that you did, or somebody writing notes for me. Super easy to get notes to someone. I had to throw in the rainbow flip-flops. If anybody remembers the rainbow flip-flops versus now Crocs. As a coach, I cannot stand Crocs. I cannot stand them because we already have an issue with our kids getting outside and not knowing how to walk straight. And then you put Crocs in the mix, and oh my goodness, just the dexterity of a kid's feet and toes and how to actually, like, when was the last time you saw a kid climb a fence? Like literally saw a kid climb a fence just for fun. Someone said porn versus JCPenney bra pictures. Oh my goodness, yes. That was like when the ads came with the newspaper, or the little ads, that they put in the newspaper. Yes, porn was JCPenney's bra pictures, but now Pornhub online, super easy, quick to go to, absolutely increases the risk of what kids have exposure to, and then what they may be thinking about outside of that exposure. We had payphones back then versus smartphones now. And a smartphone is relatively new, but it has changed the way that the child's developing brain sees, views its world. Back then, the traumatic family movies, now I have to go here, you guys. We watched traumatic family movies together back then. Gremlins was traumatizing, but we watched that. Chuck E. Cheese, I couldn't tell you how long I couldn't see someone in a costume because it just seemed like they were menacing. We did these things as a family, and it was like, suck it up, get over it, right? But now we have trigger warnings. Now there's safe spaces. So that's a big difference. I won't even get into the major conversation about trauma regarding that, but you guys can think about it. Think about the traumatic family movies that you watched, or the traumatic things that you did as a kid. And back as a 60s, 70s, 80s kid, you just did it. And sometimes your parents didn't even know, that you did it. But when it came to doing some of these things together, I just cannot, like, every time I think about watching Gremlins as a family, it's just funny to me, because we don't so much look at things that way anymore. We also had separation back then, and tolerance. And when I say tolerance, we just kind of like dealt with each other, and maybe in some spaces tried to be nice about it. But now there's more focus on being respectful and being inclusive. That is a big difference with this generation. And we are not excluding or separating. We're looking at diversity. That language is spoken now more. So even though there are some things that seem like they're challenging, there are some things where we have progressed. I love, someone said, Frederica said, we were always playing outside. Yes. Yeah, we had to memorize a lot of things as kids. How many phone numbers do you know now? I still know my great-grandparents' phone numbers from 1985, but I could not tell you a phone number that I just got last year. I just couldn't. We don't so much use that part of our brain anymore, and you use it or you lose it. And so that is something that our kids are facing too. That is a risk to them. So these are just the differences, just to kind of set the stage between what did it look like then, what does it look like now. And so I love that you all chimed in on that. So let's, oh, going the wrong direction. There we go. So what increases risky decisions? When you think about, and here you go again in the chat box, when you all think about what increases the risk for a child to make a decision, let me rephrase that. Why do kids make risky decisions? What increases the likelihood that a kid might make a risky decision? Go ahead and drop that in the chat box for me. What might increase the likelihood that a kid would go ahead and make a risky decision? What are some things that they might be thinking about? Peer pressure, absolutely, Angela, thank you. Peer pressure is one of those things. Yes, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, those will increase the likelihood that a child may make a risky decision because of the way that those adverse experiences have now wired them. Any other thoughts? What might increase? What might a kid be thinking about that has them saying, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it? Yes, they might be feeling bored. They might be feeling unconnected from their peers. They might have mental health challenges and they might be self-medicating, absolutely. And their parents might be naive about it. Their parents may just not know. Being left alone, you have idle time, definitely. I can remember, I haven't heard this phrase in a long time, but an idle mind or idle time is the devil's playground. I remember hearing that as a kid, hearing that back then, but I don't know that I've heard that recently. Okay, so these are all some things that might increase that risk. So I'm gonna get this down, you guys. I'm trying to do it the fancy way. So here are 3 things that will always increase the risk, okay, you all. Number 1 is norms. And so you have already put some of those things down. So please remember this. There are 3 things that will increase the risk that a child may make a risky decision, increase the likelihood for them to make a risky decision. Norms, meaning that the way the people around them are thinking about it. So social norms are, my parents may have favorable attitudes, or they may lack the ability or lack the desire to tell me that it's wrong, or or maybe they just haven't said it. And so I feel like as a kid, it's not that big of a deal. And maybe I think my friends are doing it. So when you look at current youth substance use rates, that would be a potential norm. Feeling unseen and unheard. There is definitely a norm right now of kids feeling invisible. So when you think about the different types of kids and the different ways that kids are presenting themselves, you know, you have the kids who always have the hood over their head, like they are either they've been unseen or unheard, or they're trying to be unseen and unheard. And then another kid sees that, and that sort of becomes a thing in the way that they do it. You all have seen it, wearing a hoodie. Here right now today, I think it's supposed to be 111 degrees today here in Phoenix. If a kid has on a hoodie today, it's probably because of something trendy or something that they're trying to be unseen or unheard about. And so those are all examples of social norms. Whenever a norm supports a risk, you're going to see that risk increase. So that's one area. The next area is access. Whenever a kid has access, and this is not just a kid, when we look at access norms, and the last one will be availability, we are talking about a public health model. And with public health, whenever you have the increase of any of these things, you're going to have a greater likelihood that that's going to happen. So if a kid has access to something, if they can go and buy it hand to hand in a retail location, at a Circle K, from a friend at school, so school comes into play there, or somewhere in their community, if they have access to these things, that is going to increase the likelihood that they are going to use it. So can you think of an example? This is just to drive the point home so we can leave here having something embedded in our brain related to this. Can you think of something that kids have access to a lot that they use, and drop that in the chat box? You see a lot of access to it and they use it. Could be anything. Yes, cell phones, exactly. There was a time when you didn't see a 3rd grader or a 2nd grader with a cell phone, but now that's very common. And the more that people saw 2nd and 3rd and 4th graders with cell phones, the more 2nd and 3rd and 4th graders got cell phones. So that was a social norm that created greater access. Social media, absolutely. It's there. There's a great access to it, not only for that kid's personal personal device, but they can access social media on someone else's device. Alcohol, whenever alcohol is accessible, it might be in the home, it might be because we're having family parties or picnics, or maybe it was in the cooler at the family party and nobody's paying attention. Access, that is access. So whenever there is access, it doesn't mean the kid is going to do it. And same thing with the legalization of marijuana. Doesn't mean the kid is going to do it, but it increases the likelihood. You all following me? So in increasing the likelihood, we have a greater risk or greater potential of risk for that child. So that is if it's in a retail location, if it's in their community or in their school. And I left family off of here, but home would be another place, okay? So yes, 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 and more yes. All righty, let me move forward to the third one, which is availability. So the norm supports it. They have access to it. It is available. So when I say available, I can actually find it. Not that that place usually stores it and I could go and I have access to get to that place, but this is that it is available. So when you think of retail availability, when you think of school availability, community availability, and family or home availability, if it is available in those spaces, it is a greater likelihood, again, that the kids will engage in it. And I want you to think about this. You can write this down or remember it or whatever. I want you to think about the domains that a kid lives in. So a kid lives in, let's say, 5 domains, okay? First and foremost, with themselves, with their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviors. They live inside themselves. That's one domain. And with that domain, you can add their peers to that, right? So that child, that individual and their peer has an influence on the decisions that they're going to make. Well, then you have family. Family is another domain. So that domain is going to be pretty close to the child. That has an impact on the child and could have an immediate impact because family, whatever that looks like, it does not look the same for every kid, right? But whatever that looks like, it's going to have an impact on that child. And then right outside of that, you've got school. School is a place where they go regularly or they have some sort of interaction regularly. And so school has an impact. Peers are in school, but school as a domain, a child typically is not going to work. Maybe an older child, like a older high school age child, but for the most part, most kids are going to school or some sort of schooling. So that's going to have an impact. And then you have community. So community, I put the first 2 together. That's why there were individual and peer. Family or home, school and community. School and community are separate, okay? A kid exists in all of those domains. So I want you to think about you. Think about who you were as a kid and those domains that you lived in and the child that you are here thinking about or the children that you are here thinking about. When you were their age, what did those domains look like for you? Was there a lot of risk in those domains? Was there a lot of protection in those domains? And so when we look at availability, when availability increases, that kid has the likelihood of that risk increasing. And we can put anything in availability. We can put marijuana, we can put alcohol, we could put weapons, we can put violence, we can put, when the availability of that increases, the risk to that child increases, okay? So those are the 3 things that you want to think about first and foremost. So when we look at risk, we're going to look at what are we talking about? What is the risk? And I just kind of laid out a few of them. That risk, we're talking about the potential for early aggressive behavior. The risk are lack of parental supervision and therefore academic problems. If they have this greater risk, undiagnosed mental health problems is a potential because of the risk. Peer substance use is another risk. And again, we just talked about drug availability. Poverty is another risk, peer rejection, and then child abuse or neglect. These are all potential risks. When norms, access, and availability are there, these are some of the greatest potential risks to our youth. So take a snapshot of this list. And when we're talking about what our kids are up against, these are some of the things that they're up against when access, norms, and availability are there, okay? So someone brought up adverse childhood experiences earlier. And so what increases that risk outside of access, norms, and availability are adverse childhood experiences. And with adverse childhood experiences, we're talking about, if you look on the left side, these are the things that are common that would increase, would be looked at as an adverse childhood experience for a kid. And as adults, we could all look back at, did we have adverse childhood experiences? And so the more adversity that a person goes through or that they face in their life, the greater risk they have to lifetime negative health outcomes. It doesn't guarantee it. It doesn't mean that an individual is going to have a lifetime of negative health or a lifetime of challenging health, but it does mean that there is an increase in the likelihood of greater negative health outcomes later in life. And so when we look at those the potential for negative health outcomes, we're talking about health outcomes like heart disease, diabetes, the impact of stress and fatigue on the body. So the physical decline of the body as a result of what has happened out there environmentally. If you're following me in the chat box, say yes, I get it. Just drop me a yes if you're following. Thank you, Patsy. Okay, awesome, Emily. Okay. So we are backing this up. I love to see these yeses. Thank you. So as you're following me, understand that when we have this conversation, it's easy to always talk about the negativity, the things that are wrong, the things that have been terrible in a kid's life or terrible in a kid's environment or terrible in a kid's school. Those things we cannot change. We cannot change the risk. The majority of the risks are things that we just, either they will not change, like a family that a child was born into, or a genetic disposition, or family substance misuse in the past or present, the community that a child lives in, even the laws that are like the right now. Some of these things we cannot change. We cannot have a direct, immediate, and sometimes even long-term impact on it. So risk sometimes are a lost cause in terms of affecting change, but that doesn't mean that we don't have power. Doesn't mean that we can't do anything. What we do want to do is we want to add protection. And protection is really important, because if I have 2 cups and 1 cup has risk and 1 cup has protection, I can pour as much as I want into that protection cup. I can keep pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring until it overflows, and do the best not to add any more risk. But if risk are added, that's fine. I've got protection. I'm going to keep pouring protection in there. So protection looks like family engagement. How often can we get a family engaged? It looks like family support. Every kid deserves support. Family support, whatever family looks like for that kid. The definition is not one altruistic thing. It also looks like a parent clearly disapproving of substance misuse, substance abuse, clearly disapproving and clearly setting rules and boundaries. And it also looks like parental monitoring. And one of the most effective things is a positive, caring adult. That is like the #1 protective factor. Think of who that positive, caring adult was in your life. And I'm actually going to ask you to drop that name. I'm going to drop a name myself and tell you a positive, caring adult in my life as I was in high school. That was him. So when you think of who was that person in your life, that person lives, that impact of that person lives with you on. I have not been with Johnny Estrada in my life as a child for a really, really long time. This was one of my high school coaches. So much protection that he poured into me, right? And so you can think of too many to name, Diane. I get you, right? I did too. That's the one that popped into my mind to begin with. And yes, I had tons. And a kid should have access to at least one. There should be at least one person that they can think of right now, today. When I was 14 years old, I knew that Johnny was a protective factor to me. I didn't know the language protective factor, but I knew he was someone that I looked up to, someone that I could go to, someone who cared about me doing well in life. I knew that this was one of those individuals in my life. And so every kid should be able to move into adulthood, move through childhood and into adulthood with that. School connectedness is the last one that's listed here. And with school connectedness, when a kid feels like they belong in school, feels like they're connected to a school environment, feels like there are positive things that they can be a part of in school, they can have.
Rhonda,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask if you can just slow down just a little bit for our interpreter. That
I'm
way,
sorry, I totally forgot.
no worries.
All right. Okay, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. With school connectedness, when a kid can have that connection that says, I belong in school, that says, I'm a part of this, I want to be in this place, they are less likely to engage in negative risk. Right. Church could have been another one. And for many kids, when they have a connection to outside of school, when they have a connection to a location or an organization or something where people are congregated doing positive things, again, that is additional protection. So that protection is really important. We can pour as much protection into a child as we possibly can. Protection can be endless. It is possible for there to be no limit on the amount of protection that a child can get, okay? And that is protection in those domains: protection with their peers, protection in school, protection in family, and protection in their communities, to then help to build and foster protection within themselves so that they make positive choices, okay? So one of the things that can make it difficult as we are protecting a child is that when those risks increase, or as those risks are, maybe they're right in the middle of something risky, or feeling the impact of their environment, the impact of their school, mental health is definitely challenged. Every one of us has a mental health status. What does that mental health status look like? Well, I can go right now and I can put on a blood pressure cuff and I can tell you what my blood pressure is right now. But how do you do that with your mental health? Is there a cuff to put on? Is there a scale to get on to determine how much does my mental health weigh right now? How stressed am I? How heavy am I with stress? How heavy am I with fatigue? It's not as simple to do it with mental health. And what I will tell you is that we do have more than half of our kids who experience severe depressive episodes, severe. And much of the time, the majority of the time, those kids are not getting any treatment for it. Now, if I have a cough right now, I know I can go and grab a cough drop. Or if I'm feeling sick, I get a cold, I know where Walgreens is, I know where CVS is. I can go to those locations and help to treat my symptoms. But where does a kid go to treat a severe or even moderate depressive episode? Oftentimes, it's left unchecked. And for kids, if a kid is gonna deal with a diagnosable mental illness, it typically shows up around the age 14. Well, let me say not typically, about 50% of the time, it shows up by age 14. And then it's not diagnosed for 10 years. So imagine having a stomach ache for 10 years and not knowing why, not knowing how to stop it, where it's coming from, and people getting tired of you talking about this stomach ache. And so then you just stop talking about it. And that's kind of the experience of a person, an individual dealing with challenging or mental health disparities, mental health challenges. And so mental health is another thing that we want to make sure that we're focusing on when we're looking at how we can address a young person making risky decisions. So there are several areas that I'm going to give you that can help a person to increase their mental wellness. So these 9 areas of wellness, I put it on this equalizer because I'm old school and I like old school references. So these 9 areas of wellness at the bottom: physical, emotional, creative, environmental, financial, career, intellectual, social, and spiritual. So in these areas of wellness, this is for everybody. A kid might have more focus in some areas than others. And even for yourself, if you were to fill in this chart and look at your wellness, what helps you, what do you need more of or less of to equalize? Are you getting enough physical wellness? Are you getting enough emotional wellness? And so on and so forth. So if you take this and you kind of do a weekly or monthly kind of check-in to see where you are for yourself, you get in the habit of it. You can also pass on that habit to a child. A child may not know how to categorize each of these areas, but that's where we come in as adults. How do we help a child to recognize you have a lot of things that go into you to help you determine how healthy you feel on the inside and the outside? We get good physical wellness, then we feel better physically. Emotionally, if we're feeling not as fatigued, not as drained by the things that are going on around us, then we're feeling better about who we are emotionally. That means that I feel happier. I feel more joy. I feel more gratitude in my life. So any questions about this? Oh, Diane, thank you. That was me over 10 years. Sorry about that. It was hard to read. I put it on this very dark background too. And I do have a lighter version of this. Thank you, Diane. Okay. And let me just say this about the equalizer. Everything doesn't have to be at 100%. And more than likely, everything is not going to be at 100%. There may be some weeks where a child is focused on being creative, and that is the thing that they're doing, and that is bringing them a tremendous amount of joy. So creativity is high, and emotionally, it's high. But maybe they're feeling like, I really wish I had more allowance, or maybe it's an older child who's like, I'm really trying to save up for this, and I just don't feel like I have the ability to save up for it. And so you may see some ups and downs. Ups and downs are fine in this. Whatever makes you feel equalized. You know, you don't want too much bass, too much treble. You want a nice amount, you know, of each. But some songs, maybe you want more bass. I do a lot of analogies, you guys. I hope you're following me. I hope you are okay with it. Okay. So let's move on now to the part where we've had this chat about this portion, and I can stop for a minute and answer any questions that you might have, because this is going to be broken into 3 parts. And the slide that you see up, can you recognize today's drug paraphernalia? This is going to be a little bit of a different conversation. Thank you, Diane. Awesome. So any questions about the equalizer, about risk and protection? All righty. Okay. So can you recognize today's drug paraphernalia? Drug paraphernalia, let's go ahead and drop that in the chat box. What drug paraphernalia do you know? It can be 1-word answers. How about drug language? What are some of the words that you've heard? Okay. Thank you, Anne. It is really important that we learn from each other. Really important that we learn from each other. Thank you, thank you. Patsy says, I need a list. You know, I actually didn't put a list together in here, but I will tell you this, there are some places you can go online and you can get a pretty up-to-date understanding of what some of the language is. There's some sources that do a pretty good job. Okay. Out of touch, need a list, yep. Fetty, vape, pipe, kit, tutor, okay, good deal. So weed is the only one I really know. Yep, out of touch. So I appreciate that, being out of touch. Here's the thing about drug language and drug paraphernalia. There's some paraphernalia that is kind of tried and true and has sort of stayed the same. But then there's always some new creativity that comes about that might be just kind of a new way to look at an old device. Vapes, for example, vapes are relatively new. I mean, the idea of vaping a substance is not completely new, but the way that we see it, because it's sold in so many places and it's so publicly consumed now, many of the devices do look they are brand new. So let's go on so that we can look at some of these things. This is a very words heavy slide. So when you said, I need a list, you can take a picture of this. Let me get off that so I can come down. You can take a picture of this, and I am going to break down each one. This is just everything all at once and the most common right now. When I say most common, when we look at what youth are using, and when youth are surveyed nationwide, and then in our own states, these are the substances that they are surveyed on. So what is the use rate? How often are our kids using some of these things, or our youth using some of these things? And let me say this, the majority of kids do not use. The majority of kids do not do drugs, the majority. However, some of the drugs use that we're seeing now is having a bigger impact on kids than we have ever seen before. And so that is very concerning. Thank you, Jackie. Very concerning. So let's go to each one. So when we're identifying paraphernalia, okay, so when we're identifying paraphernalia, these are just a few things that you would want to be mindful of. Any plastic baggies or small little paper bags, electronic cigarettes, obviously. And when I say electronic cigarettes, there are so many different types of vape devices now. Big, small, single hit vape devices. I'm going to send you all on a little field trip. When you have the time this weekend, I want you to go into one of just your local, like a Circle K or one of the local gas stations that sell some of the vape devices. Many of the big box gas stations sell them. When you go in and get gas, I want you to check out the vape devices if you are unfamiliar with them. And it'll just kind of give you an understanding of what they look like and what the packaging looks like, okay? If we're not up to date, the best way to stay up to date is to get up to date. So just taking a look, and that this is just an environmental scan. When you go and get gas, just take a look at the vape devices that they sell. Sometimes what you will see is advertisement on the window or the door when you walk into, and I say Circle K because I don't know that you guys have, you don't have any QTs in California, but there's Circle Ks and 7-Eleven, things like that. And on the door, they usually have some sort of a poster or across the door handle. And I know Circle K does that across the door handle, and you'll see the different types of vape devices. Also, if you're seeing small glass vials or pill bottles, candy or gum wrappers, these are paraphernalia. Baseball caps, ski caps, belt buckles, these are some of the things where you can hide some things. Felt tip markers and lipstick dispensers, this would be like for concealment, where you can take off the back and you can put pills in the back of a felt tip marker, or in a lipstick dispenser, you could take off the top of the lipstick dispenser and put something underneath where the lipstick was, or you can buy some of these things off of Amazon as well. I will give you another virtual field trip, and I'm going to drop this in the chat box. When we are done with this call, what I want you to do is go on Amazon, and I want you to search for this. Search for concealment safe, okay? Thank you, Anne. Yes, the bindles, the folded dollars or paper, the small little folded ones, absolutely. Those are also drug paraphernalia. Yep. So here's the thing about the selling of the paraphernalia to kids. It depends on your community. Yes, you can. It does not become drug paraphernalia until drugs are in it. So I had you search concealment safe, because you will find drug paraphernalia among the concealment safes. But concealment safes, they're supposed to conceal your valuables. But what's valuable to one person is different to another person, right? But in your valuables, if you were hiding money or jewelry or things like that, there's concealment safe stores. And so they have, and now Amazon has quite a few concealment safes. They don't have any drug paraphernalia in them when it's delivered to the home. So it's not illegal to sell something that has not had drugs in it. So the answer to that is yes. And then, yes, you will have adults who also consent or, have approval for it. So you will have adults doing it. What you also will find is that kids will augment different things that they already have to be able to conceal. So they may not go out on Amazon and search for it. I'm sending you on Amazon because the idea is there. So if they know, oh, I can hide something in this, they might take something already at home. You have a felt tip marker at home, you can use your own felt tip marker. However, you can buy them. You can buy the Sharpies, you can buy the highlighters, and rather than, you could go to Dollar Tree and get, or the 99-cent store and get one for $1.25. It's not even the 99-cent store anymore, right? You can get one for $1.25 rather than paying $10 for it on Amazon or $8 for it on Amazon. Okay, let's go to the next category. So the next category we're going to look at, we're just looking at marijuana. I'm not going to go through it exhaustive, but when you look at this list, are there things that stick out to you? Things that you are familiar with? Some of the things are old school, tried and true, like a roach clip, right? Those are still there. Some of them look a little different now, but it still burns to a small level where it could burn your fingers. And so there has to be something to hold it, right? And so they look different now. Some of them are very clever. You can find those on Amazon as well. Just FYI. You also can do this search on TikTok. If you have a TikTok account or access to TikTok account, you can take any of these and search these terms on TikTok and just kind of see what's out there. I will not pretend like I know every single concealment device out there or what every single paraphernalia look like. Over the years, I have seen some very creative things that kids have done. Probably one of the most creative from a young kid that I remember early in my career. You know those big gigantic cups that you get in like Las Vegas? Usually they're Las Vegas. They're really tall, they're skinny. I think they call it a whalebone, or at least they used to. And you drink from it, right? And it's sold with alcohol in it in Vegas. So a kid decided that they would make a bong out of that and rubber cemented their trumpet mouthpiece into it. So took the parents' whalebone glass and also decided, I don't want to do this trumpet thing anymore, and rubber cemented the trumpet mouthpiece into the whalebone to make a bong. Kids are very clever. We send them to school to be bright and smart, and they use those smarts sometimes not in the ways that we want them to or we'd like them to, but that is something that we definitely want to massage, the ability for a kid to be creative. We just want them to put it in the appropriate places. Okay, heroin. I will tell you this about heroin. So, and on this list, there's heroin and cocaine. So heroin, it's not as popular as it once was back in its heyday and like post-Vietnam, right? And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but it is still out there. It is still very cheap for a kid to get. And if they are needing to get something because they are down the spectrum and they're actually using, we are not talking about first use. People don't pick up heroin and use it for the first time as a first use. It does not go like that. But if we believe there is the progression to heroin use, we've got all of these items that are common items, the small spoon, the needles, the tin foil. These are all things that are common items. A plastic pen case, if you see a pen that has no writing utensil in it, it's just the pen. That's it, just the plastic, or a drinking straw, or a kid always has a drinking straw. These things are likened to heroin often. Heroin is the central nervous system depressant. Cocaine is the upper. So heroin's the downer, cocaine is the upper. And they definitely have some similar paraphernalia, very similar paraphernalia. Do you all see that? They do two different things. Heroin brings you down, cocaine brings you up, but you have similarities in the paraphernalia for both of them, okay? And someone had mentioned before the rolled up dollar or the paper tubes. that would definitely be a heroin type paraphernalia or something that you could snort. Okay, so when we take a look at this list, ecstasy, MDMA, Molly's, they keep coming back in popularity. We connect it to club drugs, or raves have kind of had a comeback. They kind of lagged for a little bit, but raves have had a comeback. So in the raving, you have the glow sticks, you have the surgical mask, which became very interesting after the pandemic, right? Pacifiers and lollipops. And why the pacifiers and lollipops? Because they cause you to clench your teeth. And so in clenching the teeth, you put something in the person's mouth, or the kid will put something in their mouth to prevent them from clenching their teeth and grinding their jaws. So that's why there's a lollipop. That's why there's a pacifier, like at a rave, but a lollipop, if you're not in a rave. It'd be kind of interesting to walk into 4th or 5th period with a pacifier in your mouth, but not a lollipop maybe, right? So some of these things are more akin to where you will be in the environment, and others are functional reasons. So like I said, a lollipop may not cause anybody to raise their eyebrow if a kid just took some ecstasy and they're putting that lollipop in their mouth and they're just walking, you know, through the mall, down the street or whatever. Inhalants, this class of drugs is not a drug at all. It is a poison. And inhalants, it stops the oxygen to your brain. So anything that comes out of an aerosol can be inhaled. So aerosol cans, like spray paints, or even like hairspray and things at home, anything out of an aerosol can be inhaled. A lot of things will be put on a rag for sniffing. It is not, again, a class of drugs, but it has been used as a class of drugs because it impacts the brain in a way that's going to create this disassociation with the body. And so that's one of the reasons that it became popular to use. You typically see inhalant use for middle schoolers. This is typically not a high school thing. I'm not saying that high schoolers don't or haven't, but you see inhalant use increase big time for middle schoolers. Sometimes things will be put into balloons. So if you're around a school campus, or if you've seen some of these things before and you're like, why are there tubes of glue here? Or why are there all of these balloons here? These are other paraphernalia that are used to inhale. So with the balloons, like CO2, putting the CO2 in the balloon, or helium, and sucking on the helium. I get really picky about my kids. I definitely never want my kids to put helium in their mouths. It creates sort of this loopiness in the head, and because the oxygen is leaving your brain, it can cause you to pass out. But the thing about it is, if the oxygen doesn't come back to the brain fast enough, you get brain damage. And so some of the things as parents and caregivers, what you would look for is the child having an issue with things that they used to be able to do? Common math problems, reading. These are some of the things that inhalants will have an impact on very quickly, okay? And some of the more common, well, it used to be, and I'm gonna tell you this because things make their way back around. So spray paints used to be really common in like the early 2000s. That seems like a really long time ago now. But spray paints were really, really common, 2005, 2007, 2008. Silver and gold spray paint. So if a kid has spray paint on their fingertips and they're not a tagger, and maybe even if they are a tagger, but they're not a tagger, and you're noticing that their fingers are colored with that silver or gold, that might be an indication. So that's something that would be something to watch out for. And if a kid has a chemical odor, if they smell like chemicals, then that would definitely be, let's have a conversation, what's been going on. Okay, you guys still awake? All right, we're gonna play a game in a second. I'm just kidding. Frederica looks like she's thank you, Patsy. She looks like she's like, okay, that's enough about inhalants. Inhalants is one that really scares me because it's so easy to get. It's so accessible. Remember I said norms, access, and availability. So if these things are available, that's an easy availability one. And who was it that asked the question? Judy said, do store clerks sell? Think about some of the places where kids can get some of these things. I think about Dollar Tree, 99-cent only store. Some of these things are very easy to get in these places. This next slide just gives us a couple of things on how to cover up drug use. Tried and true mouthwash and mints and breath sprays or whatever. But when we're talking about vaping, you're not gonna need a mint or mouthwash to cover up vaping, right? This is kind of some of the old school stuff. But eye drops, you're still gonna have those eyes turning red on many of these things. Sunglasses for sure, because the eyes are the window to the soul. The eyes will tell it. So if you guys get really good at looking at the eyes, that is really important. Someone could be sitting and chill and not doing anything. And if you don't know that they're on something because you haven't looked at the eyes, you just may never know. But their pupil size and their eye movements, pupil size on a depressant is going to get really, really small. So like heroin or opioids, the pupil is going to get really small. On a stimulant, the pupils are going to get really big. They're going to be like saucer size. So the way that the pupils dilate will tell you what's happening. Your pupils on a regular day where you got lots of sunlight and, you know, it's just a regular day, like in the room that I'm in, my eyes are not all blown out. But if you turn off the lights and my eyes are trying to adjust to light, they're going to be really big. My pupils are going to be really big, right? And so if you kind of get used to like, look in people's pupils and see what a standard size pupil looks like when someone is not on something. What I will tell you is that when someone is medicated, there are medications out there though that will change their pupil size. So you also should be familiar with that. And that pupil size, it's not going to stay that same size once the medication has done what it's supposed to do. So just kind of, you know, to prep yourself and what does it look like? Some of us may know better what someone under the influence looks like, and some of us may not have as much of an idea. So kind of do that. I've given you a little bit more homework. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some specific substances, and we're going to talk about two of them. The first one, we'll talk about vapes because that is very popular right now. So the brands that are very popular are Puff Bar, Views, Hyde, and Smoke. These are popular brands. We're seeing about 25% of students using them daily. Remember, again, I said the majority of students do not use. 25% is not the majority. But that is a lot of students who use them daily. So if you have a child who is not using and you ask them what's going on at school, like, do you ever see people using at school? They will tell you what the bathrooms look like. The bathroom is the most common place at school. Here are some of the most common types of vapes that are used. I can't say that I've yet to see a kid with an e-pipe, but they are available. But the large size tank devices and the small disposables, those and rechargeables sometimes, these are the more common ones, especially that medium sized tank device. That's going to be a more common one. When you go into the Circle K and you do your homework, what you will find are the disposable puff bars. Those are very, very common, and they're just kind of like I shouldn't say one hitter, but a one-time use. It's a one-time use, okay? The next one that is very important for us to talk about is the presence of fentanyl in a lot of these commonly used substances. So when I said earlier, you all, that we had not seen kids having some of the results that we're seeing now, it was never a thing for kids overdosing on substances. Maybe here and there you would hear it, but it was very uncommon for a kid to overdose on drugs. That is so much more common now. You know, and the big reason that is common is because of the presence of fentanyl. Fentanyl is in almost all of the substance abuse overdoses. Fentanyl was involved. So in 2021, between 2018 and 2021, we had a 4-time increase in the number of kids who overdosed under the age of 20. They died from fentanyl between 2018 and 2021. So that's more than 1,500 kids. And that's nationwide. And that is a tremendous amount of children. So I've said it, I'm going to say it again. Fentanyl is the #1 reason, and we should all make sure that our kids are aware that fentanyl is the #1 substance found in fatal overdoses. I can tell you that kids are not looking for fentanyl. That is not the way that it goes. Unfortunately, they're finding their way to substances that have fentanyl in it. What I have been told by the DEA is that if it is coming off the street, it's in a pill form, we just assume that it has fentanyl in it. There's so much illegally manufactured fentanyl on our streets, and you guys are a border state, just like Arizona is a border state. The states that are border states have a higher availability of it in the communities because it's coming across the borders and making its way up into the US. And why is it now coming across the border? That was not the case before, but there's been an easy method, an easy way to manufacture it down south. And so, and when I say down south, I mean in Mexico specifically. Usually the precursor would come into California on ships, and it would come into the docks in LA, and then it would make its way down to Mexico. Now it is more so being manufactured illegally in Mexico without so much of the necessity for the precursors coming across waters. So fentanyl, scale of 1 to 10, how much do you all feel like you're familiar with fentanyl? Fentanyl being like 10, I absolutely understand, I know what's going on, I got it. And 1 being, I have no clue. I'm not aware of what's going on with this at all. Yeah, who just asked that question? Let me scroll up. Patsy, yes, it is cheaper to mix in. What we have found now, it used to be really expensive. You know, when we all understand that we were very overprescribed. Okay, so you guys, most of you don't feel like you have any understanding of fentanyl. Okay, so fentanyl is an opioid, and I'm going to get more into that. So let me actually just go there. Fentanyl is an opioid, and opioids were, for the most part in this country, we were using them for like, and this is before fentanyl, opioids for like major surgeries. And so if the person had a back surgery or a knee surgery, it was a very effective pain reliever. So let me back up so that you guys don't have to read and listen at the same time. It was a very effective pain reliever. And we saw it in oxycodone, Oxycontin. These are the things that we understood early that those things did an amazing job of relieving pain when someone had major surgeries. Unfortunately, they were also very highly addictive. And so if a person is on it for 7 days or more, the possibility of addiction increases just because of the way that it impacts the body, right? Not because that person was looking for an addiction, but because of the way that it impacts the body. And so with that, we saw a spike in opioid misuse, abuse, and then fentanyl came into the picture, which before was only prescribed to like maybe terminally ill cancer patients to relieve pain. Unfortunately, with the illegal manufacture, it drove the price down. So it's very cheap to illegally manufacture and add fentanyl into the substances. So if a kid is thinking that they're getting a Xanax that they're purchasing illegally, that Xanax is more than likely mixed with some fentanyl. And it used to be for an opioid pill, $5 per milligram for a 30 milligram pill. And I'm taking you back to like 2012, 2010, $5 a milligram for a 30 milligram pill. You do the math. Now we're talking about 25 cents per pill. So the price has gone down dramatically, much easier to get. $2 for a hit of heroin now versus 25 cents for a pill that has fentanyl in it. You take the risk with the illegally manufactured fentanyl that it's going to be a fatal dose of fentanyl. So this is what's happening. There's a fatal dose of fentanyl in many of these pills. And so that kid gets it, someone has illegally manufactured it, you've got 2 people standing next to each other, counting out the amount of fentanyl, the grains or granules of fentanyl that should be in that dose, and they miscount, or they've gotten tired, or whatever. They put too much. And so this pill has a fatal dose in it, this pill does not. And literally that's what we see happening, okay? So how do you know if someone is overdosing? Well, here's what you wanna remember. it depresses the central nervous system. So it's going to bring everything down. And when it brings everything down, that person may have slow or no breathing. You may see someone doing a heavy nod. A heavy nod means that they're coming down this way and they're continuing to nod all the way down. And so they may be very hard to wake up. They may not be responsive. Their breathing is going to be shallow or no breathing. And sometimes it'll sound like maybe a snoring or a gurgling sound. They're losing oxygen. So their fingernails may be blue. Their lips may be blue or gray. Their skin may look sort of like the color is going. And that does not matter what color you are. The skin may look like the color is going. And it also may be cold and clammy. So if you touch the back of your hand to their skin, it may feel clammy, like wet, but cold. And one way we know that is helping to bring people back is naloxone or Narcan, which now you can get over the counter. Some places you can get it absolutely free, but it just buys you time, because now with the doses being so high, it's taking a lot of naloxone and Narcan to bring a person back. And when I say doses, like 4 to 5 doses to bring a person back, but it does reverse the overdose. It is the only product on the market that will reverse an overdose. The only substance where you can reverse an overdose is from an opioid, and that would be with naloxone or Narcan. Your EMT or emergency or police, they carry it. They typically carry it now, and they carry a lot of it. So you always, always, always want to call 911, period. If you carry Narcan or naloxone, or you have bought it at your local pharmacy, you do not need a prescription for it. If you have purchased it, then you give that dose, but you call 911. See if I have any questions in the chat box. Okay. So how are you effective? I've kind of woven some of these things in as we've been talking. I didn't want to get all the way to the end to just look at how some things that you do. So some of the things are repetitive. I'll go back over. And if you do have any questions about can you recognize the language and the paraphernalia, you can drop those in the chat box as well. Okay, so the effective tools to prevent or intervene. I told you, you guys are pros at some of this. So some of it is going to be like, oh, I already do that. I already know that. Number one, let's start with increasing family bonding. It is really important to increase the family bonding time. Why? Because if we increase the family bonding time, that is the epicenter of prevention. That is the epicenter of prevention. When a kid feels connected to their family, the people around them, they are less likely to engage in substance misuse. That is just the true, tried and true fact. And we know that as kids get older, they want some separation, they want some independence. So we should be coaching them in how to be independent of the family, outside of the family, but still connected to the family. That is really important. So increase the communication that you have with them as you're increasing their ability to be out there without you. Making sure that you're checking in with them, they're checking in with you, and that's regular. It's not a punishment. That's what we do as a family. And if you call me your tia, tío, abuelo, nana, whatever, grandma, mom, bruh, whatever, if you call me any of those things, then we should be connected and we should be bonded. But that doesn't mean that I have to be with you everywhere you go, because at some point you are going to have to take care of yourself. I did it, right? We all did it. At some point you have to have that. And so that's important that they understand that. So bond, bond, bond as they get older. Allow them that opportunity to bond with you and ask those questions that they wouldn't have even thought to ask as younger kids. So family bonding it's a critical component, parental involvement, critical component of prevention. The second one is preparing to set expectations. If you're talking about younger kids get a lot of expectations. We don't want to remove those expectations as they get older. So as they get older, that teenage brain, it is not primed to make logical decisions. The teenage brain is not. And when I tell you, I see it every day, you guys, in my house. I'm like, whoa, Okay, that wasn't logical at all, but I'm thinking with a fully developed brain. So let's back up. I have a new story. If you guys heard my blueberry story when my son was 11, I knew that his brain was changing. I'd asked him to wash the container of blueberries to make sure that his brothers and sisters, his siblings, could eat snacks. And when I walked back through the kitchen, he was washing the container of blueberries, the container. And I'm like, why are you washing the container? Oh, that's what you said. Okay, are you going to eat the blueberries? He said, yes. Okay, so why not wash the blueberries in the container? Because you didn't say that. You said wash the container of blueberries. Okay, so that is 100% brain development. 100% brain development. So as we are prepping them, set expectations so they don't have to just rely on their brain. It is really important. They're not doing it intentionally. That is just what happens. An 11-year-old girl has about a half a brain. A 14 to 15-year-old boy has about a half a brain. So the full brain development for a girl comes around 22, for a boy somewhere between 28 and 30. Okay, so if you have boys, that might explain some things. Now we can increase that time just by giving them opportunities to plan and prioritize and control their impulses. We can increase that time, okay? So focus on the behavior, you all, and not the person. Again, because they are learning. They are 14 and 15 for the first time in their lives. You're looking back 14, 15 years. They just got there. So as they just got there, and it's tough as a parent. For me, it is tough. It is tough for me to give grace when I'm like, oh, we've been here, we just learned this. But it's really important that we focus on the behavior. You did this, not you are that. Not you can never make a change. It's important that they know that you are on their team. Have some empathy. Like, what bird brain things did you do at 13, 14, 15, right? They don't know you like that. They don't know. They know you now, the superhero that you have become in their lives, even when they're irritated with you. That's who they know you as. They don't know you as 12-year-old Frederica. They don't know you as 11-year-old Karina, right? They don't know that about you. So have some empathy for what they're going through, because they honestly wouldn't do it if their goal is not to get in trouble. That's all they're thinking of. I'm going to be in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble. That's all they're thinking of. They don't want that. They just don't know how to do it differently just yet. So focus on the behavior and not the person. And then that will help you to stave off depression and stress and anxiety from them. Okay. And we don't want to add that. You do want to know their activities, and you want to make sure that they know you need to know their activities. And I know I have just a few more minutes here, and we're wrapping this up. We're coming to the end of our last couple of what things that you can do. Be careful with just handing over their life to them. They are unqualified. They do not have the resume yet to handle their own life. They need practice. They need more experience. They need skills. And they need motivation to do what you expect of them. Why? Because they have peers and environment and TikTok and all of these other things that is vying for their attention. They are not qualified to be in charge of their own lives 100% just yet. That's where we're trying to get them to develop the skill. So make sure that you visit their expectations. Thank you, Angela. Make sure that you visit your expectations with them. Please tell them. Don't say, oh, they know who I am. They know what I expect. They may know that you have that mean mug all the time, but if you have not told them your expectations, please don't assume it. They do not have a full brain. So they're not just always going to be thinking about that. Have face-to-face interaction with them, and also have some online interaction with them. Get in there online with them, whether you're FaceTiming them on their phone or sitting down with them at a computer. Look for those coachable moments. Coachable moments. Sometimes that's because a news story came up. That's sometimes because somebody else's kid did something. Sometimes that's because it reminded you of something that you did. Please look for the coachable moments. And in those coachable moments, do you have a kid who's a high risk taker, a low risk taker, or a medium risk taker? You need to know that about them, because that's going to determine the way they make decisions when they're not with you. Okay. So, and the last thing, I think I said this to begin with, but in their activities, know the company that they keep. Who are their friends? Why are we doing this? Because I need you to be successful on your own. So if we step into the role of coach, I'm not playing the game for you. I cannot, but I got to coach you so that you have the skills and the ability to do it on your own and think through these plays when I'm not with you, or when you think that you should be doing something just because your friends are doing it. Recognizing warning signs. I've already gone through how to recognize if you feel like there's an overdose, or if you're not sure that there may be an overdose, but also recognize warning signs of risk. Have they changed their friends? Have they changed the way that they talk or dress? Thank you, Flor. Have they changed the things that they're doing? Some of it they should, because they're getting older, but you want to monitor their stress level, monitor their environment, who they're with, monitor their language. And the only way you do that is you stay in conversation with them. That is really important, to stay in conversation with them, okay? And sometimes, sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's like, maybe we have a Friday conversation, that's what we do. Substance abuse is not the first thing that kids go to do regularly. There are so many other things that they do, and we want to develop their skills in everything that they're interested in. So this is our wrap up. This is the last one. Number 5, in helping develop the skills in the things that they're interested in. Give them opportunities to use those skills. They may not be the same skills that you learned as a teen or a younger child, and that's okay. It's an interest to them right now. Jump on that, because that's a sensitive period. You're going to lose that period if they don't have the ability to practice it, be engaged in it, and then give them recognition for it. Hey, good job with that. Oh, I like that you did that. Oh, that was really cool of you. Tell me more about that. Give them recognition for those things so that you can build this really strong tree for them to continue to grow on. Skills, opportunities for involvement and recognition. And that is the last slide. Some of my sources of information came from these places: the CDC, the National Institute of Mental Health, the USDA. I gave a couple of things out of there as well. If you are interested in some of these slides, I have no problem. I think you guys are going to have an opportunity to have them. I'm always available for questions. We have 2 minutes left in this regularly scheduled program. What questions do you have right now?
I have a question in regards to the fentanyl and it looking like candy. I mean, I have a 6-year-old, so I'm not really familiar with it being readily available, but it seems like it's kind of died down. Is it still as available to kids in candy? I mean, this Halloween, I felt like none of my circle was going trick-or-treating or letting the kids get candy because of that. Is that still a big issue?
I always hear this thing related to Halloween and kids getting drugs for Halloween. Typically, a drug dealer is looking to make money, and it's not usually the case, them giving away free drugs, although it does happen. And usually it's a little bit more calculated than that with it happening, giving out a few little samples. They need the source they need people to be able to come back to the source, not like we got some random drugs at this one house and we don't know which house that was. That's not typical, but that is something that adults are concerned about. Yeah.
So for the fentanyl that was like the candy, was that just like drug dealer kids, and the kids were like the siblings of the drug dealers, and were those just random isolated incidents?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not really like.
Yeah, because you have younger kids. No, so it was connected. It was you're always going to find that connection. It was connected to wherever that source was coming from. Those kids knew how to get back to that source. But the rainbow fentanyl that you're talking about, that was kind of a ploy because the M30s or the blues, those got a bad rap because people knew that people were overdosing on the M30s, which are just the blue Oxycontin pill.
Mm,
And so they made them in different colors. You still can find them in different colors, but yes, the blues have come back. So predominantly, you're gonna find that M30 pill in blue. You may still find it in green, a pastel green or pink or yellow, but
Yes.
it kind of died down. Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure.
Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And I feel
You're
like this
welcome.
class was extremely helpful for me. Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm glad.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. I'm glad you came.